Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of MikroTik Canada's MTCNA tutorials. In this video, we're going to talk about one thing only, and that is the smaller steps inside the 5 main chains or processes of the routing flow. We mentioned that the routing flow has 5 main processes or chains, namely prerouting, input, forward, output, and postrouting. However, to complete each of them, the router goes through a series of smaller steps. We'll number the processes from 1 to 5 and their smaller stages from 1 to 6, as we'll later use these for identification purposes in upcoming sessions. If you remember, an incoming packet from the physical in interface of our router would enter the routing flow from point I and first hit the prerouting process. Prerouting consists of hotspot in, raw prerouting, connection tracking, mangle prerouting, and destination NAT. So, for configuring the components of this process, you can first refer to the IP menu and the hotspot submenu, where you can find all hotspot conditions. Next, from the IP menu and the firewall submenu, you can refer to the raw tab and use the prerouting option when creating a new raw rule. Next, there's connection tracking, where you can refer to the tracking window and turn connection tracking on or off or set it to auto. You can also input a number of other variables for tracking purposes. Then, you have the mangle tab, and when creating a mangle rule, you have prerouting as a chain option. And finally, in the NAT table, you can create a NAT rule and use destination NAT as its chain. Next, as we mentioned before, a packet whose destination IP address is assigned to the class AP will be regarded as input traffic and moves toward the input process. This process has 4 stages, namely mangle input, filter input, the queue tree, and simple queues. You can find mangle input in the mangle tab when creating a mangle rule. Therefore, mangle input becomes the very first step where a packet can be captured in the input process. For filter input, you can refer to the filter table, create a filter rule, and use input as the chain. As for HTTP global or the queue tree, you can refer to the queues menu and then the queue tree tab. Just so you know, HTTP stands for Hierarchical Token Bucket, and it is a class-based queuing method that is useful for managing different types of traffic. And finally, you can refer to the Simple Queues tab for the last step of the input process. We go over the topic of queues in this program in the QoS module, but talk about queues and queuing in more detail in the MTC-TCE course. Back in the routing flow, if the destination IP address of our packet is assigned to a device other than our router, that packet will be regarded as forwarded traffic and turns toward the forward process. Forward has 5 steps: a bridge decision, a subtraction of the packet's time to live, mangle forward, filter forward, and finally, a counting. The first step, which can be configured via the bridge menu, comes in handy when you have a bridged port and wish to utilize the Use IP Firewall option to send the packet to layer 3 filter rules. This subject will be covered in both the MTCWE course and the MTC-TCE program. In the next step, that packet's time to live will be down by 1 because the packet is forwarded traffic, and once it passes the routing decision stage before the forward process, it is actually past 1 hop. However, if we refer to the mangle table and choose the forward chain as a condition, you have the option to change the packet's time to live by using the change TTL action. Bear in mind that time to live and when to change it are discussed in detail in the MTC-TCE course. Next, you have the mangle forward step, which can be found as a condition in the same window, and afterward, by creating a filter rule from the filter table, you can use the forward chain and set up the filter forward step of this process. And then there is the counting step, which is outside the scope of MTCNA and will be discussed in detail in MTC-TCE and MTC-UME. The next process is output, and if you remember, if a packet's source IP address was assigned to the router, that meant the packet was generated by the router as output traffic, which will enter the routing flow from point K, pass 1 routing decision stage, and come upon the output process. The output process includes a bridge decision, row outputs, connection tracking, mangle outputs, and filter outputs, at the end of which the routing decision that has just been made will be duly adjusted. Just like in the forward process, you can set up all bridging configuration in the bridge menu. Next, from the IP menu and the firewall submenu, you can refer to the row tab to use the settings of the row output step. Then, you have connection tracking, which from the connections tab can be set to on, off, or auto, and configured with more details using the values given. The next step is mangle output, which can be set up from the mangle table. And then you have filter output, for which you can refer to the filters table, create a new rule, and use the output chain. Finally, as the last step of the output process, you have routing adjustment, which does not contain any specific actions and is in fact the stage where the results of the mangle output and filter output steps are applied. And as the fifth main process of the routing flow, you have post-routing, which comes after either the output process or the forward process. Post-routing contains mangle post-routing, source NAT, hotspot out, queue tree, and simple queues. As for the first step, you can refer to the mangle table and use the post-routing chain when creating a new mangle rule. For source NAT, you need to go to the NAT table, create a new NAT rule, and use the source NAT chain. As for hotspot out, just as in pre-routing, you can access all hotspot settings from the IP menu and the hotspot submenu. And in the very end, from the queues menu on the left, you can access the configurations of the queue tree as well as those of simple queues. That is it for this session, friends. Stay tuned for next session as we'll be coming with a number of practical examples regarding firewall settings. As always, let us know your questions in the comment section and subscribe to our channel for future episodes.